For recursion mystery 6, we are given code and a parameter. We're passing through a parameter of type string, and we need to go through the code. So our first parameter is high. From here, we are going to go look at our else if statements, and we see that it is not an if statement because the length is 2. It does not equal 0. And we are going to go into our else if, because if s.length is modulus 2 is equal to 0, that means we are going to be in this part of the code. Since our high string has the length of 2, that means the modulus of it is 0. Here and here we are making new strings, and what we're doing is we are using the type string to make a new variable. So we are going to have rest and last of type string. This s.substring and this s.substring is slightly different. Our first one has 2 parameters and our second one has 1 parameter. For our first substring that has 2 parameters, it returns a string that is a substring of the string. The first parameter passed in specifies the beginning index of the string, where whatever is before that to the left of the string gets cut off, and it extends to whatever ending index you choose, -1, which cuts out everything to the right of that, so it returns everything in those bounds. The reason why it is the ending index -1 is because the length of a string is 1 more than the index. So if the string length is 7, the indexes are 6. For our second one, it's going to do the same thing. However, we only can specify the beginning index, and it goes to the very end of the string. So continuing on, we see that our first index is 0, so it's going to start at 0. For this, that means it's going to start at the h, and s.length -1. Our length is 2, and it is going to go to, that means that their index is going to be 1. So for here, we're going to have h, and here, since our index is 1, we would look at I as our first index. However, we do not include the last index. After this, we need to look to our return statement next, and we have last, and our last is going to store s.length -1. This is going to store our first index, which is I. The difference between the first substring and the second substring is that the first takes 2 parameters and the second one just takes 1 parameter. But both of them only include the index at which they start at. So this one includes index 0 and this one includes index 1. The second substring does not have a second parameter. However, the first one does, and it is the ending index. The ending index is not included in the substring. From here, we write out what we have. So we need to go into our return statement. We return last, which is I, and we have a recursion next. So looking at this part, we have to return rest. So the only thing in here is h, so we're going to pass the parameter of h back up here. We are going to run through this again. We need to be in our else statement. Since our length is 1, we see that our string first is going to be s.substring 0, 1. We only have the 0th index. So for our 0th index, we have h. We don't have anything in our first index. And then string rest is s.substring 1. We don't have anything here. So there is nothing on this. Also nothing here. And we need to return a parenthesis, and our first is just h, and then another parenthesis, plus recursionMystery6 rest. So if we did have something in rest, we would need to go back into our method because of recursion. However, since we don't have anything, this is just the answer. In our second problem, we're past the parameter quirk, and the length of this is 5. So here we are going to go into our else statement, and we need to assign our first s.substring 0 to 1. So this means that we are going from our first index to our 0th index to our first index, not including the first index. That means that what's stored in first is just going to be q, because it is our 0th index, and u is our first index. However, we do not include the first index. And s.substring 1, and that's just going to include 1. Now we look at our return statement, and we have parenthesis first, which is q, plus recursionMystery6 rest. And actually, for s.substring, it starts at 1, and since there is no ending index, we print out the rest of the string. So we're only emitting q, and we have u, I, r, k. That's actually in here. And we are passing u, I, r, k back into our method. From here, we can see that s.length is 4. That is the modulus of 2 of that is equal to 0. That means we are going to be in our else if statement now. From here, we see that our starting index is 0, so that's u, and s.length minus 1, it's going to end at k, because we are getting our third index. So that means this is just going to be u, I, r, and s.substring is s.length minus 1, and for this we are starting at index 3, and the only thing at 3 is k, so that's the only thing that we're storing in here. We are going to look into our return statement here, and it's asking us to return last, which is k, and recursionMystery6 rest. So we have another recursion right here. We are going to take rest, which is u, I, r, and we have to pass it like this back into our method. And we have the length value 3, so we are going to be in our else statement as well. From here, we start at the index 0, and we end at index 1. So the only thing stored in first is u, s.substring 1, so we are starting at the index 1. That means we're going to have I and R stored in here. It's asking us to output parenthesis and first, which is u, and then another parenthesis, plus the recursionMystery6 rest. So we have to take I, R, which is what we store in rest, and we are going to use recursion and push it back into our method. Our length is 2, so we're going to be in our else if statement. In our else if statement, we are assigning rest to the index 0, and our length is 2, so that means from 0 to index 1. And we don't include index 1, so the only thing that's going to be stored in rest is I. In last, we are doing s.length minus 1, so we're going to get index 1. At index 1 is r, so this is going to store index r. From here, we're going to output last, so we're just printing r right here, and we need to return rest, so we are returning I. We can write this out here, and we will use gray to go back like this into our method. This has a length 1, so this is going to be in our else statement. s.substring index 0 to 1. Well, our index is I, and it's only I, and we have no index 0, so this is nothing. It's asking us for a parenthesis to output first. Our first is I, and then another parenthesis, and then recursionMystery6 rest. Well, we have nothing in rest, so that means this is our answer.